Renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden presented this theory on Hackman in a recent television appearance, saying, quote, there was no carbon monoxide, and he had the most common cause of death in this country, severe heart disease. So that would cause him, having cardiac arrest in the mudroom, to collapse right there. Interesting theory from Dr. Baden, being able to trace back the date on the pacemaker as well. Gene Hackman might have been dead for 9 days, according to what his pacemaker showed. So what else are investigators going to dig into? Maybe the cell phones, perhaps? What can be gleaned from the scene? What about at autopsy? And did you hear portions of their bodies had become mummified? We have two tremendous guests here on the program this morning. I want to bring them in now. Board-certified forensic pathologist Dr. Priya Banerjee and crime scene reconstruction expert Dr. Kenny Kinsey. Good morning to you both. So let's start, if we can, with the things that can give us clues as to how Gene Hackman, his wife, and their dog died. Ladies first, please. Dr. Banerjee.
Good morning. I think, anytime we have two people dead, that's the unusual aspect of it. But I've seen it in the past, and it doesn't always mean it's nefarious. Anything happened. It could just be really terrible circumstances, if you will, terrible turn of events. There's pictures of beautiful home that you're seeing. In any case, I think, he's quite elderly, probably had a cardiac event like Dr. Baden was saying. And I think she probably had something catastrophic. And I wonder if the stress of that then triggered him. Unfortunately, the dog, in my understanding, was in a crate or isolated. If they don't have someone to care for the dog, then the dog will also perish.
Right, so sad, because we know two other dogs were alive and well on the property, but the one that was in the kennel, as we understand it, it would stand to reason wouldn't have access to food and water. Dr. Kenny Kinsey, to you next, please. What are the things that you would think would give us the biggest clues about what happened?
Thank you, Ms. Julie. Some of the things that have been mentioned so far and have been released, lack of blunt force injuries, lack of those things that we look for as crime scene investigators, be it blood spatter, be it footwear, anything that would lead them to believe this could have been foul play. And from everything I've seen released so far, we don't have any of that in this case. And the best evidence, of course, is going to be a timeline. And with the information that was gathered from the pacemaker, I believe they're well on their way. And I have to agree with the good doctor. It could just be a chain of unfortunate medical events. And then with the canine, we're probably looking at malnourishment, unless they're going a different angle. Once you rule out the carbon monoxide, unless it's a poison, whether it be induced or a natural occurring poison, and that's not going to come out to the toxicology. I think we have a chain of unfortunate events by everything that's on the table thus far.
Thank you for that, Dr. Kinsey. I want to show you and Dr. Banerjee some of the facts that we know this morning. I know there are a lot of unanswered questions, more unanswered than there are answered at this point, but here's what we know. Their bodies were found after a welfare check. Apparently, it was maintenance workers on the property who discovered them. They've both tested negative for carbon monoxide poisoning, which was something that was speculated. One of Gene Hackman's children thought initially that could be a cause of death. According to the affidavit, Gene Hackman's wife, Betsy, had mummification in both her hands and her feet. One of the deputies on the scene said it looked like Gene Hackman had a sudden fall in the mudroom, just based on what he saw. His cane was there, his sunglasses were there. And we know where Betsy's body was. There was an open prescription bottle, scattered pills on a counter in the bathroom. And what Dr. Kenny Kinsey just noted for us, no signs of that external trauma. Which brings me to a question for you, please, Dr. Banerjee. I want to share with you another part of Dr. Michael Baden's theory here, that perhaps Gene Hackman had fallen first, and then perhaps his wife goes to help him in the bathroom, maybe goes to get pills. Let's say it was a cardiac event. He's theorizing that maybe she struck her head on the way down, had some kind of internal injury to the brain that isn't going to show up on the outside, maybe some bleeding on the inside of the brain, and saying that perhaps that could have been what occurred here. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. And just to backtrack, sort of tying everything together, when we approach, like my colleagues and I and the investigators approach a case like this, anybody's death, you have to look and rule out the bad things first. And slowly we're gleaning facts that less and less, there's no evidence of trauma. All the bad things are slowly being ruled out, both by autopsy and investigation. Once the toxicology comes back, that's the money. I think once, we can speculate who passed first and of what. I don't know of what her internal findings were. If there was head trauma, quite a possibility. It's also, did he react to her passing? I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg type thing. I just don't know because we have so many unknowns. The autopsy is still the gold standard, and unfortunately, that's not a 1, 2, 3, like a quick exam. And remember, toxicology takes time. And I hope that my colleagues will, be able to expedite things, and slowly the most important and probably the most reassuring facts will be released, like no trauma, no evidence of robbery, nothing bad like that. But slowly it'll unfold. Again, this is a team effort. It's not just autopsy, it's investigation, it's police. So it's a team effort working to solve this and give us all the answers.
Well said, Dr. Priya. Thank you for that. We know that a press conference was held the other day by the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office to update everyone on what's been gleaned so far, including the last reading from Gene Hackman's pacemaker. Let's take a look.
An initial interrogation was conducted of Mr. Hackman's pacemaker. This revealed that his last event was recorded on February 17th, 2025. I was advised that a more thorough investigation will be completed.
Based on what you know about the conditions of both the bodies, who do you believe died first?
That's a very hard thing to determine. Even with the assistance of OMI, we asked that question because that's a question that we want answered. That's a very hard determination to make, and I don't think even OMI could make that determination based on the initial autopsy.
Okay, so let's talk about the autopsy and the cell phones. I'm wondering what can be gleaned from the cell phones. Dr. Kenny Kinsey, would you speak to us about that as it relates to what you said, the importance of establishing that timeline?
Yeah, Ms. Julie. Court, depending on the carrier and the type of service, it can give so much valuable information. Sometimes movement, any activity, whether it, be text, emails, phone calls, that kind of thing, and it'll reinforce, it can support the information that they've gathered from the pacemaker at this point. And like the doctor and the law enforcement administrator said, it's a very hard thing to determine which one came first. Maybe cell phone activity could help provide an answer to that. Maybe it won't. But it's one of those things that you have to dig into it. And just like with the toxicology and the teamwork between investigations and pathology, it takes time to get that information.
Sure. Thank you for that, Dr. Kinsey. Dr. Priya Banerjee, let me go to you about the autopsy, something that I think can be stunning to hear for many of us who aren't used to doing autopsies like you are. You hear that there's been parts of Gene Hackman's wife's body that have mummified her extremities, as we understand it. Would you explain and describe for us, if you would, what exactly that means and how it might affect what you would do at autopsy?
Sure. So I think, that's the mummification, which is the appropriate term, is a part of decomposition. So that happens after death. And in a inside level, we start decomposing as soon as we die, but to be recognizable, it has to be days, multiple days. I can't say exactly. But interestingly, there could even be like microclimates in such a big house. So you can't always just use, it's not a predictable number of days that someone would mummify. Mummification, just to clarify, is drying of the hands, like the skin or the feet of the hands and feet, excuse me, and it becomes leathery. So it can be, sort of the softness and the warmth of the hands and feet go away. It can be sort of leathery to really, really hard. Again, just being a drying effect, which is consistent in a desert environment. More than that, it's hard to say. It's not a trauma finding.
Understood. Just something kind of fascinating, I think, with this case, which just all around is fascinating. Just so sad, the way in which Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy and their dog all found dead. And we thank him for his service. We've learned he was a Marine, and that is something wonderful to remember about him in addition to all the great acting. We'll leave the conversation there for now, but big thanks to you both for your time and your expertise. Dr. Priya Banerjee, Dr. Kenny Kinsey, thank you both so very much.